Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faisal Raza and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, today we are witnessing a changing Pakistan. Pakistan that is picking up has successfully curtailed its fiscal, current account and trade deficits. Foreign exchange reserves are growing, currency getting stable, exports and remittances are boosted, agriculture, large-scale manufacturing and other sectors are recovering. Foreign direct investment is picking up, while stock exchange for a very healthy period of time, it has performed very well and making new records. Though there are lots of hiccups and hurdles still exist, but overall economic indicators are promising. Hopes are positively alive that Pakistan's economy is going to be stable as soon as possible, along with the life of a common human being. To talk on these all aspects, we have in our studios Brigadier Retired Hamid Rashid Malik, he is a senior analyst. Along with him, Dr. Usman Chohan, he is also an economist. And on online, Dr. Hasnain Javed, senior economist, is joining us. So most welcome to you all. Thank you very much. And the first question is related to, particularly to Dr. Usman. Do you think that this steady economic growth is because of some principled decisions, structural reforms, measures taken at the highest level and the better economic governance?
Yes, absolutely. These are important factors. The most important thing for me is that we're headed in the right direction, that we are looking at what is important to fix in our economy, and at the same time we are cognizant of the major changes in the global economy at the same time. The problems that we face in Pakistan are in fact not specific to us, but we as a global community face certain fundamental challenges. One fundamental challenge is inflation, so the cost of energy is higher everywhere. The second is that there is a lot of instability in the world as a whole, and the second order effects of that play out in countries like ours and everywhere else. And the third, that is the shifting demographics of the world, with an aging developed world and a very fecund developing world, means that there is a misallocation of talent and capital in the world. Because these big problems affect us as well as everybody else, we have to be prepared for these things, and I think our leadership has shown cognizance in the sense of having a clear economic plan to execute going forward.
So, Brigadier Retired Hamid, what's the key role SIFC, the Special Investment Facilitation Council, has played to maintain and to stable the economy?
I would like to add further to what Dr. Usman said is the direction. SIFC, along with the previous government, had joint hand to have a special focus as well as direction for the economic recovery, because what we have seen an year of depression, year of recession, and also there were rumors of economic meltdown or default. But what ISAFC has been able to achieve is not only the revival but also a solid plan for recovery of our economy. And to that extent, I would like to say that what we see now, that a better exchange rate, the increase in the foreign direct investment, also that we have seen that the exports are now gaining momentum. Our imports have come to a halt almost, but with the passage of time, government is going to allow that the raw material is imported so that the exports get another exponential growth also. And here I would also like to add that our current account deficit has also gone lower, that from 3.1 billion to about 1 billion, and all these steps has been taken by the SFC, and now it is paramount for caretaker government as well as the government after the election, whichever comes in power, whichever party, they must have a manifesto that the economy recovery should be on the forefront of their mandate, as well as they would try that this momentum which has been achieved in the last 3 or 4 months should continue in future also.
Well said, well said. Dr. Hasnain, when we are talking about particularly Special Investment Facilitation Council, do you think that enough has been done regarding to attract foreign direct investment in the country? As right now, if we take the last month, November's figures, at least 12% of the foreign direct investments picked up regarding Pakistan's economy.
The very first thing I would like to mention is that SIFC settled down a ground for you. Yet to become, I mean, $100 billion yet to become, but they have a well-balanced, maintained ground for us. The very important reason is we are on the path of recovery. So recovery mean we follow the IMF, and what follow the IMF mean there are two type of the people. One people, or what we can say, the analyst, who are the neutral observers, and one is the participant observers. So neutral observers always criticize IMF, though we are in the 23rd time in IMF, but I would say that IMF is like an antibiotic. It is a taper up process, it's a taper down process, and then is a taper off process. We cannot, fully would never complete the full course of the antibiotic. So it is very important, first come first, that now because of the IMF structure and their instruction, we are following that, and we are now on the right path. So Pakistan economy slowly slowed sharply in 2023, with the real GDP estimated to have contracted by 0.6%. Reason, the culmination of the domestic and external shocks, including the flood of 2022, you remember, I think. So government restriction on the import and capital flow and the domestic political is the main reason for the slowing down of the whole of the economic process. So by arrangement SBA, new external financing and continued fiscal restraint, real GDP growth is projected to recover 1.7%, which is absolutely, after the highest shock, it is better on the FY24 and 2.4 in the
Dr. Hasnain, you have just mentioned about the future projection of the GDP about 1.7, but these are the figures of the World Bank. ADB says, Asian Development Bank, that it's going to be 1.9, while International Monetary Fund says that it's going to be 2.5. So
2.4,
what is going to be the realistic one?
It could be if I go currently, if I say 9 months back it was 0.29, but coming out of it realistically it goes by 1.4% to 1.9%. It is as per my expectation, because we are no more in the current account deficit. But try to understand, the current account deficit is not a very harmful thing, but we are in the current account surplus. Though it is just a few millions of the surplus, but the current account deficit always remain to the growth
that is
side.
the fraction.
So
that is the fraction we have now.
We are not that much on the growth side, because our policy rate is on 22%. So we have to reduce down and cut down to the 9 to 10%. And our policy maker must have to focus on these side, so that our policy rate must be from the 22% to the 9 to 10%, so that inflation can go down. And the very important thing is, when interest rate goes down, industry grows up. When the industry grows up, of course the unemployment rate goes down. But the very important thing is, the headline inflation sustained is 26.9%. On a year-on-year basis in October 2023 as compared to 26.6% in October. So the current account marked a deficit. Initially, that what they told was 1.5 billion, but now we are in surplus. But that is not the indication that we are on growth. But we are on the way to growth, which is a very directional, very positive, and very recovered side of it. And
your point well taken. Your point well taken, Dr. Usman. When we are talking about investments in Pakistan, particularly the foreign direct investments, whether our investment policies are sustained now that we are going to protect the current investors and also invite more investors into Pakistan, and they are satisfied on that note?
Yes, absolutely. The most important thing for us as a society, not just at the government level, is to make sure that there is an ease of doing business. This is an indication of several metrics, about 20 metrics that you look at and you compare. So the foreign investor looks at Pakistan and other countries in the same category and then decides amongst them. So you have to be competitive within this category in terms of making it easy to do business. Some of the key things in that where we have to work are on the regulatory side, on the oversight side, on the contractual side, on the energy side, and on the permit side. So these things can be easily fixed because they are more of management issues. Then there are more deep and structurally set issues which take more time, but those are also not so hard. But the rubric of having an ease of doing business, I think, is very important for having investors. And there's three categories we have to look at. One is the domestic pool of capital, which is actually quite large because Pakistanis do have quite a bit of capital, but because we have such a large informal economy, we don't deploy the full scope of that capital. The second category is the overseas Pakistanis, and the overseas Pakistanis have been in a wait and see mode, and they're also availing themselves of opportunities in other countries. And the third is the foreign investor with foreign capital. That is probably the most lucrative one, but it is also the most difficult to tempt because they don't have a direct connection to Pakistan in the way that Pakistani origin people do. So you have to address each of these tiers of capital, and I think the most important one in this regard is the local Pakistani, to have that confidence in the system that they can be part of a formal system and be proactive and dynamic. This is
definitely your point well taken. Brigadier Retired Hamid, caretaker finance minister, was very much satisfied on that at least Pakistan is able to curtail or contain the trade deficit. That is marginal right now, but that is satisfactory. How do you see it?
I think this is silver lining for Pakistan economy because it will reduce the pressure on our foreign reserves. Earlier what we have seen that the depleting foreign reserve was one of the core issue on which the government was worried, and the people were saying about the rumors of the default because the repayment of our loan was also becoming an issue. But I think now with the balance payment has been addressed, then Pakistan in the future also would try that instead of wasting its foreign reserve on unnecessary or luxurious items import, Pakistan should have a very pragmatic and prudent import and export policy where it should go for the encouraging the exporters for the export. And I think there have been few I think incidents in the past which are going to give boost to Pakistan export. First, that Pakistan is trying that through ISFC the foreign direct investment comes to the large scale manufacturers also. And second is that the GSP plus status again extended to Pakistan. And Pakistan market also available in America as well as in China and in Gulf countries also. And I think with these initiatives taken by the SFC and also as highlighted by Dr. Usman, that we need to encourage the public partnership in Pakistan also.
Public-private partnership, yes, definitely. Your point well taken. Dr. Usman, when we are talking about Pakistan's trade and particularly the exports, now government comes up with an ambitious target of having at least $50 billion of exports in next 5 years and at least 100 billion in the long run. So do you think that the trade policy is very vibrant and or we have to entirely change it and modernize it to achieve such an ambitious target?
It depends on the categories of exports that we want to target. Now, as I have seen, this government has been very versatile in its approach, which is to say that it wants to export at the high end, which is IT software and IT related services. That's excellent. And at the same time, we have other traditional forms of exports, which include manufacturing as well as food and commodities like that. So when you have a full spectrum of exports, it's much easier to reach the target of 50 billion. For a country as large as ours, I think even 100 billion is quite a small number. We should be very integrated into the world trade system and we should easily attain 100 billion. And keep in mind that our economy is largely, in terms of the proportion of GDP growth, consumption driven. But instead we need a larger portion of investment and we need a larger portion of exports. And given that we are the world's 5th biggest country, I would imagine that we should have the 5th biggest amount dollar value of exports.
Yeah, definitely, your point well taken. Dr. Hasnain, when we are talking about import tariffs and preferential market access for increased trade volume and revenue along with that, why not to promote a competitive policy and explore new markets? Although it is right that we have a generalized scheme of preferences or something like that and some sort of preferences at the trade level, but do you think that it is going to be positive or sustainable in long run?
As I use the word freezing, so first in the Levine process, first we need to freeze the system which is unstable. So it was before that time we were going to the collapse side. So now we have come out of the collapse and we are on the freezing side. So first we need to freeze and then we have to refreeze and then we have to remove the economy. So we are on the paths to recover. So the very important thing is before the preferential trade, before the, of course, the bilateral trades and trilateral trades, we have to have the agreement of the free trade agreement with the other countries, of course. Because I am in the favor of free trade agreement rather than the bilateral or trilateral agreements, because it is very much narrow, and otherwise into the BTL, we know that what was happen in the Rakotic matter, what was happen in the other matters. So we don't want to be in the bilateral trade. So the important thing is now, the currently very focused, and by using the power of now, we must have to use the power of now, that the stability in the exchange rate is in the supply distribution due to the removal of the import restriction and improved dollar liquidity contributed to this economy upswing. And during the first 4 months of the 2024, overall economy is encouraging as MEI continued to be positive in October 23 and driven by the notable improvement in key indicator of economic activity and the better performance of large-scale manufacture. Of course, in large-scale manufacture, as Mr. Khan, as you are telling us that for example, preferential trade agreement or the bilateral or the multilateral, better is to have the foreign direct investment under the free trade agreement as agriculture goes on, and later in the program I'll let you know. But the LSM factor fueled by a positive trend in the high frequency data and steady uptick in imports and improvement in CLI of the Pakistan major export market are providing impute to overall economic activity, and all these gains are also reflected in improved fiscal and external account position. That is very much important. Another social sector, or for example, if the agriculture sector or the revenue relative to the expenditure, the fiscal deficit reduced to 0.9% in the large scale manufacture, and of course agriculture sector, I would definitely appreciate this government or maybe any of the department, whosoever working on the agriculture sector, the input situation shows positive signs, and which is very much important for us. The farm tractor production and sales witnessed growth of 55.1%, which is about the 17,098, and which is about the 86.8%. So respectively, October in 24 over the corresponding period last year. So during the October 2023, the 6.8% growth in urea and 122% in DAP. So offtake compared to October 22, indicating a positive growth of Rabi crops. So I am very much hopeful in the agriculture sector, and we can grab much of the foreign direct investment in the agriculture sector.
Yeah, your point well taken. Dr. Hasnain, when we are talking about imports and exports, why import substitution is higher than why we are not adopting export-led economic growth?
Very, very important. This is not just my mantra, but all the time when I was in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, when I was in the Board of Investment, I usually ask them to use the mantra export, export, and export, and we must have to have the export-led system. But now currently we have the policy rate of 22%. You tell me, even I am the industry, I cannot insert my money into the industry because it is the 22% of the policy rate. So I need to have the subsidy, I need to have the trickle down effect, I need to have the lower of the policy rate up to the 9 to 10%. So our policy maker must have to think on it so that it could be a 9 to 10, so that I can invest into or maybe other people can invest into the manufacturing, and manufacturing is the key for everything. We need to manufacture most of the things, because the Central Asian state needs many things. There is a China, then even you have seen that there is in the textile sector, the Bangladesh is more higher revenue than the China. Can you imagine? Why not us? We can do much better policies on that, but of course we need to have the continuous 5-year plan and the government for the 5 years, so then all the policies must be present there, and it should not be changeable policies. It should
Dr. Hasnain, well elaborated. Dr. Usman, when we are talking about, as you have rightly mentioned, about cost of doing business, as Dr. Hasnain mentioned, that policy rate is 22%. So what's the reason behind? Because it is actually discouraging the internal investor as well and the external investor as well. So how do you see this particular time? Why a State Bank is too cautious on that approach?
I'm very glad that you asked this question because it's very fundamental to economics in general. That when you plan out a future investment, you have a discount rate. That means the risk-free rate plus some additional risk premium. Now, if your basic discount rate is so high, you are better off taking your capital and parking it in the bank and getting 22% for free. Why would you undertake any risks? Why would you undertake any effort? So the fact is that when your discount rate is low, then you have an incentive to go out and find better opportunities. And because the risk-free rate is so high right now, it is a response, in fact, to the inflation being so high. Inflation being so high means that everything is so costly in general that people's economic drives are not incentivized. And as Dr. Hasnain said, a policy rate of about 8 to 10 would make sense for an emerging market. Even that is high by world standards, but for an emerging market it makes sense. And especially for a country that is not energy producing, we actually import a big portion of our energy, is a big portion of our import bill, is about 30%. That means that we have embedded that, we import that inflation into our system because oil is more expensive. And oil is also more expensive because of global conflict, because of global confusion. So our discount rate is a measure by the State Bank to keep in mind that inflation is so tough, and right now they had an opportunity to lower it, but they're being cautious. It is good for a emerging market bank to always, a central bank to veer on the side of caution because uncertainties in the world are so great, and then domestic uncertainties in emerging markets tend to be high.
Yeah, definitely, it is very right. Brigadier Retired Hamid, when we are talking about trade particularly, because it is very important to we just lower our imports and have more exports, but on that count it is important that we should have trade diversification. Along with that, the trade reforms, because at the domestic level. So do you think, like custom reforms and all other reforms, so do you believe that these reforms are necessary and trade diversification must have to be intact on that account?
I think there can't be two opinions about that. First is the diversification of our trade, and we also need to ensure that we reap all the benefits of our regional connectivity. Like we say, and it is a buzzword now, that Pakistan has the ideal regional connectivity, and this regional connectivity should give boost to the trade.
Obviously.
But what we see, that we have not been that focused, and our trade policy has not been geared up that we get the positive impact for our trade. And at that point, I also would like to highlight that we have a big markets available globally. Apart from America and Europe, there are other markets in the Latin America and in the Gulf countries also. What we need to have a very pragmatic, focused trade policy. We give incentives to our traders and especially to large scale manufacturers, and also highlighted that there are two stumbling blocks which is not giving a boost to our trade. First is the, as you also highlighted, that the base rate is very high, 22%, because of which there is not ease of business. People are fearful that if they get loan on such high rate, they will not be able to generate much profit.
But Brigadier Retired Hamid, there is another problem, because you know that at the grassroots level, when an investor is here and having set up some sort of industry, they need sort of tax holidays, they need some sort of cheap energy, cheap labor, raw material and all others. But these are systematically, because of the inflation and all that, these are very high right now, and even the energy rate are not equivalent to that an industrialist or an investor can bear up. So how do you see that particular thing, because reforms are ultimately needed on that account?
I was going to allude to that also, because apart from the base rate, the high energy cost, then as you also said that there are other stumbling blocks available in case of not that very friendly custom duties, and also not the MF status available to us. Only GSP plus status has been extended. What Pakistan need that in diversification of their trade, apart from hosiery, apart from textiles, agriculture, there are other avenues available, IT like. And what we have seen that the foreign direct investment in IT has been 7% increase, and at the same time our export of IT has seen an increase of 9% in the last month. I think these, and there are other service sectors also where we can provide lot of, I think, trade to the world, and we can generate lot of revenues for Pakistan. Sports energy is there. Then we have the garments apart from the leather. And I think we need to give some tax holidays, as you also alluded to, and also incentives in shape of some subsidies, that all traders who go and get good trade in the market or in the global market, we need to give them some special status, some incentives, either in shape of some revenues or in shape of some subsidized loans. And I think by this we also need to understand that when the trade takes place, when our industry is gearing up and gives lot of jobs to the youth also, and we have a youth buzz. So these all are interconnected subjects.
Your point well taken. As Brigadier Sahab said about that there is a need to have some sort of reforms at the grassroots level if we intend to enhance our exports. When you're talking about GSP plus, like generalized scheme of preferences as given by the European Union, and that is going to be extended after 31st of December. But do you think that we are used to such preferences, trade preferences, and we want to have some sort of quotas internationally, globally? Why not a competitive export? Why not to have, again, export diversification? Because some of the products which are competing internationally, but we are not adding into that some value-added products as well.
I think this is an excellent point. It's really at the core of our mindset as a society that we like to have comfortable, cozy niches and just sit in them and have somebody else pay for the cost of that. So having a competition with the world would be the best thing for us. When you look at our domestic economy, you see that there are many types of monopolies that have been essentially giving us the same product for at least 50 years. You have the same soap as you did 50 years ago. You have the same cars as you did 30 years ago. The rest of the world has moved far beyond that in the technology, in the service quality, and we're still getting the same thing. So our domestic consumer is having the same thing as before, not getting some more value, and these monopolies therefore have no incentive to go out in the world and do market research and export to them because they're happy selling the same thing they did for decades at a time. So having a competition with the rest of the world, and even within our region is a very competitive region now, Asia as a whole. If we have a real competition and we remove the preferences and other subsidies and comfort zones that we have given to our monopolies, they would realize what it really takes to compete, and some would rise and some would fall. And the ones that would fall would be good for us because we are subsidizing them. You look at the term we use for this, infant industries, but some of these industries are 50 years old. Can you deal with a 50-year-old infant? I don't think you should. So that's what I think.
Okay, your point well taken and well said, Dr. Usman. Dr. Hasnain, when we are talking about Pakistan's currency, it has competed a lot from August onward. But international currency rating agencies, they are giving the figures that might be in the next quarter of the financial year, Pakistan's rupee is going to once again depreciate to 5 to 10%. So do you think that this analysis is correct, and or gaining some sort of exports and having a current account deficit lower and the fiscal deficit curtailed, do you think that currency is going to be stable in long run?
Very important question, very pertinent question, because as I told you that the current account deficit is not the problem. So it is in the surplus, but we need a maximum growth at that side. Once we get the growth, then we can have the rupee evaluation or the valuation. So we don't have the dollar that time. For example, if we open up the import, then we can have the more dollar into the market. But currently, the stock market is going good. KSE 100 index, it is going very well. But certainly, we have to have the better shape. So the solution to the macroeconomic challenges, the major problem to our macroeconomic challenges are can be addressed through the comprehensive fiscal reform of tax policy. And my suggestion is to you is that, for example, one is the tax holiday, to complete tax holiday to the special economic zone, which is the 9 economic zone under the CPAC. So we have to install that, and we have to place many manufacturing industry as much as we can, because demand is much, even into the dairy sector, even into the agriculture sector, into the agriculture related sector. But we have to fiscal reform of the taxation policy, because taxation is very much high for the poor people or the middle tier people. So rationalization of the public expenditure, which is very much important. And as Dr. Omar says, so this what his point was very much related to the rationalization of the public expenditure, better management of the public debt, and the stronger inter-government coordination on the fiscal issue. And there is a medium-term recovery. to the regain stability and establish a base of medium-term recovery, it is recommended that drastic introduce reforms to reduce tax exemptions and broaden the tax base to the higher tax on agriculture, property, and retailers. Because of course we are not giving much tax to the feudals. We have to reduce down the taxes to the people. I mean, like farmers, but to the feudals, we have to place the much higher taxes to the feudal side. So improve the quality of the public expenditure by the reducing destructive subsidies, improving the fiscal viability of the energy sector, which is very much important. We have to work on the coal, we have to work on the energy sector, and most important, the hydro sector, not on the alternative energy. Please keep on doing whatever you want to do in alternative energy sector, but in my rational or pragmatic approach, we must have to focus on the dams and the hydropower.
So do you think that the
Yes.
taxation policy is okay for the investors particularly, and for the common public as well? Because the filers, even they are at least they are bound to pay multiple, not the double taxation, but the multiple taxation. So how do you see that point? And indirect taxes are having a large chunk, while the direct taxes are very squeezed one. So how do you see this scenario?
First, we have to segregate the small enterprise. Small enterprise is not more than the 150 crore. So then is the medium enterprise comes from the 150 crore to 800 crore. So we have to develop the understanding. We must not have to focus all those areas which are under the small sector. So farmers, the small enterprises, or the entrepreneur in the IT sector, or the agriculture sector, or the farmer sector, or the other institution and other things. And that goes to the complete tax holidays. Then we can go up to the growth side. Otherwise, we cannot. We have to place all these taxation policy to those who must have to be, because they are reducing down, they are cutting down, and they are giving the bells. The large scale manufacturers are not giving taxes at that it should be. So the middle tier or the poor tier, they are already giving on the services tax and the GST tax and on the billing tax. So there are many other ways. So a very important thing is to increase the private partnership in the state-owned enterprise. And I am requesting you on your panel that 1.67 trillion of the state-owned enterprises is pressure on our economy. We must have to rationalize privatization, not just on a random basis, but we have to rationalize this privatization.
Very important point, Dr. Hasnain. Taking your point forward, Dr. Usman, as Dr. Hasnain said about SOEs, state-owned enterprises, these are the burden at national exchequer, and we are pumping in money from the billions of rupees every year. So how do you see that one? Either the privatization is inevitable right now and we have to go on with that. Number two is that there are lots of saying that we have to go on with the tax reforms, particularly taxing the huge sectors and the elite, particularly in Pakistan. But that is not coming to reality. Why it is so?
Two important questions that you've asked. I will tackle the taxation one first. A good taxation system has certain principles. It should be a fair system, it should be neutral, it should be efficient, it should be simple, it should be rational, among others. If I asked you the same question, you would probably say that our system doesn't reach any of those goals, and that is true. Above all, it is compressing the salaried class, people like us sitting here, and it is supremely unfair. There are big sectors of our economy that are undertaxed. Agriculture is one, retail is another. And the fact is that and real estate being a third. So if we don't tackle these three large portions of our economy, we already created distortions. Taxation also has other integrated elements. For example, when you import things from abroad, you gain tax, so you're making up for it. When you have a GST that is quite high in Pakistan for poor people, and everybody has to pay that, they are distortionarily affected or disproportionately effective. So our taxation system needs a serious overhaul from the ground up. And above all, it needs to be a simple thing so that the desire to stay outside the tax net shouldn't be that high, and our tax effort needs to be high, because even in our category of countries, we should have a tax effort of about 17% or at least 15%, but we are something around 10%, which is too low. Now, the other question you asked is about SOEs, and it is true that they have been a huge drain, and when you have a fiscal compression, that expenditure on SOEs becomes too large. And there are many aspects to why. Above all, it is the way the labor costs are associated with SOEs. Then there are management issues. Now, this caretaker government and the previous government have taken this very seriously, and they have devised certain principles around which privatization should occur. The challenge, of course, is to find a good buyer who would be able to reform it and keep the core assets and the value of them translated into greater economic value. This is a difficult process, but privatization is a very large priority for this government, and I think it's very important because it goes back to your earlier question about having a more competitive market. Competition is a reason for someone to work harder or do better. You may win, you may lose, but having SOEs and comfort zones, as we said earlier, is supremely applicable to the SOE sector, and I think it is not sustainable anymore.
Your point well taken, Dr. Usman. When we are talking about Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves, they are right now at $12.5 billion and around. Do you see any improvement in that? And the stock exchange well performed, but now it's on a bit at the lower note. So how do you see these aspects?
I think these two has a interrelation with each other, and not that directly, but indirect invasion is there. And here I would like to highlight that the healthy state of foreign reserves is giving Pakistan a breathing space, that there is no burden of I think crunching repayment of its debt at least another 3 to 4 months. I think for April, which has been also reported that Pakistan has a healthy state of reserves to repay its loan till April, and I think by that time Pakistan will get another installment from the IMF, and so that we have lot in our kitty. And when a government has some resources available, it can then march on the path for the public projects for the welfare of its masses. And I think apart from that, there will be job opportunities will be created by Pakistan, and in that context, I think the cornerstone would be the establishment of the economic zone as per the CPEC, where the large industry will take place, and then the job opportunities for our youth. So in overall context and a broader perspective, I think this is a silver lining for Pakistan.
Definitely.
And now
definitely.
coming over to
your point well taken. Dr. Hasnain, when we are talking about the November economic outlook, it has a comprehensive report which was issued that give us an impetus to the Pakistan's economy is growing as the large scale manufacturing that has shown recovery. Along with that, the agriculture sector that is performing well, and after particularly now the flood stricken areas are now going to be the part of agroeconomy as well in future. So how do you see the future outlook of the next quarter of financial year 23-24?
Yes, very important. Till November, that's what we have discussed is a comprehensive picture of the till November. Now, the way forward is the domestic production of the goods and service should be encouraged, thereby reducing the reliance on import. So we have to reduce our reliance on import. To achieve this, domestic industries and sectors such as agriculture should be incentivized through the policies, credit access, and the technical assistance, such as gradually and reducing tariff on raw material and immediate goods, and expand tax base while gradually reducing burden on existing taxpayers, and diversify the export base and thereby earning for the foreign reserve. And one more thing, which would be the last from my side, but I just wanted to say that as we are moving toward the sustainable monetary policy side or to the recovery side, we must have to accumulate this thing by the IMF, that we must have to think on the Article 84 of the Constitution of Pakistan, that government must not give the supplementary grant to their SOEs or other governmental areas. So supplementary grants must have to stop. This is my final verdicts.
Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Hasnain. Thank you very much for your presence. When we are talking about the common people, they are expecting a lot from the government. So do you think that government has now enough muscles regarding the fiscal space and all that to give relief to the poor, particularly any expectation that inflation is going down to have that people must have to take a sigh of relief at least?
It is a modest start, and we can't say that we have been able to achieve what government wanted from its revival of economy plan. But I think direction is okay, and also highlighted by Dr. Usman and Dr. Hasnain. Now the effort need to be focused, and we need to stay steady on this path of progress.
Definitely.
And from that perspective, what common man needs that, and I think one step has already been taken by the government, that is the reduction in the petroleum prices. But the common man would like to see that the food inflation, which is at 40% now, should come down to some, I think, below 10. And at the same time, they would like that the prices of energy, that the electricity, which is skyrocketing, and the gas should come down, and the GST also. And I think with government focused for some betterment of its masses, these are the, I think, steps should be taken by the government, and with their kitty having some reserve available to them, and this should be taken.
Definitely, definitely. And when we are talking about Pakistan's economy, it is important that governments must have to carry on this sustained policies along with, because investors are going to be very fragile when one government changes and then the policies changes. So how do you see, Dr. Usman, that policies are going to be sustained in future, that investors who have already invested are going to be satisfied on that?
Yes, absolutely. What you're suggesting is the most important factor for the investor's appetite, which is the continuity of systems. Investing is always a very tricky business anywhere in the world. So the more you can mitigate the risk that the investor faces, the more confident they are to deploy larger sums of capital. Policy continuity is very important in that, which is to say that when a new regime of any form comes, it should not be undoing the work of the previous regime and so on and so forth, because in that policy, in unpredictable environment, it is very difficult for any investor to forecast what the future stream of cash flows will be. So continuity is something that countries that have succeeded economically have always maintained, which is to say that irrespective of the government in power, the technocrats and the business community are working towards larger goals in a sustained manner, and that is what we require too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Usman, for being with us here in studios. Thank you very much, Brigadier Retired Hamid. And thank you very much, Dr. Hasnain, for being with us online. Viewers, as our panelists suggested, that it is important that as Pakistan is steadily at the path of economic recovery and economic stability, but tax rationalization along with incentives for the investors at the national level, along with the more, but the policies regarding competent, competitive and diversified exports, lower policy rate, and state-owned enterprises must have to be privatized. That is the crux of whole of the discussion today. Along with that, all state institutions, Pakistani nation, political parties, every single community, including industrialist, agriculturist and business community, they must have to come at the one platform, must be united for Pakistan's economic stability, progress, and ultimately the prosperity for all. This is today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.